I'm Susan Euler. Ancient Egyptian mythology is very complex, with sometimes conflicting and confusing stories, and many gods and goddesses. In this program, we're going to take a look at some of the major deities and tell their stories. Before the earth was formed, the ancient Egyptians believed that the cosmos was made up of infinite waters. Then, gradually, the waters subsided and a mound of earth was revealed. This mound of earth is called the Mound of Creation. Like all aspects of the Egyptian world, this primeval mound, or hill, was viewed as a divine force, a god called Ta-Teton, the rising land. On the first day of creation, the first life form appeared, a flower, a blue lotus, which grew out of the mound of earth. It was said that from this lotus the sun blossomed into the world in 3 stages, and then rose over the mound, bringing light and warmth. The image of the primeval mound, surrounded by water, is found in many Egyptian tombs, temples, and book illustrations. At the beginning of the Bronze Age, some 5,000 years ago, the Mastaba Tomb was developed, thought by scholars to be a scale model of the Mound of Creation. In the context of the tomb, the Mound of Creation symbolized new life, that is, rebirth for the dead buried beneath it. The pyramid shape, called a benben, is a reference to the Mound of Creation and was thought by the ancient Egyptians to harness the power of life itself, making it possible for the dead to rise again. This is why Old Kingdom pharaohs went to the enormous effort and expense of building their tombs in the shape of a gigantic pyramid, believing that the pyramid would act as a kind of resurrection machine, making it possible for them to achieve eternal life. But how did the Mound of Creation appear in the first place? Who or what made the water subside and the sun rise? Good questions. According to one tradition, it was the work of the god Atum. The name Atum means the all. He existed before creation as a life force within the primeval waters, floating inert for eons of time along with Newt, the god of the water itself. But eventually he evolved into consciousness. The Egyptians described Atum's process of evolution in very concrete terms. Out of loneliness, he self-fathered 2 children, some say from a sneeze. Those children were Shu and Tefnut, the god and goddess of the void, what we would call the atmosphere. Shu and Tefnut then produced 2 children of their own, Newt, the sky, and Geb, the earth. In art, Newt and Geb are shown lying in an embrace, with their father Shu, the void, holding them apart, but not forever, because they managed to produce 4 children, Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nepenthes. These 2 divine couples, Osiris and Isis, and Seth and Nepenthes, are the deities associated with the human condition of birth, life, sexuality, and death. These 9 deities are known as the Aeneid, not to be confused with the Roman poet Virgil's epic poem of a similar name, which deals with the aftermath of the Trojan War. In any event, the Egyptian Aeneid formed the core gods of the Egyptian religion. As time went on and beliefs changed, 2 more gods were added to the group, Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis, and Ra, or Re, both of which are sun gods. The mythology associated with each of these deities was the ancient Egyptians' way of explaining the natural world and answering the same questions about human existence that we still ask today. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where do we go when we die? The ancient Egyptians thought that the sky was made up of water, a vast heavenly ocean or river like their own Nile. This is not as strange as it may seem. Look up at the sky. It's blue, it has clouds, which look and move very much like waves, and at night the sky is black or dark blue with lots of sparkles in it, stars that is. And this also looks very much like how water appears at night. The sky goddess Newt is depicted in art bending over her husband Geb, the earth. Her posture, as well as her body, which is festooned with stars, represents the canopy of heaven. Every day at dawn, Newt gives birth to the sun. who then travels across the sky until he reaches the western horizon and disappears. But if all goes well during the night, the sun appears once more at dawn, and the entire cycle begins all over again. The sun god was the most important deity in the Egyptian pantheon because he provided the warmth and light necessary for all life. The sun disk itself is called Ra, or Re. A male deity, Ra takes many forms and is combined with a number of other deities taken from diverse traditions. As a result, Ra can be represented as a man or as a sun with wings. He can also be represented as a ram, Amun-Ra, or as a falcon, Ra-Horakti, or as a man with the head of a ram or a head of a falcon. During the Amarna period, the sun god was called Aten and represented as a sun disk with rays descending from it, ending in little human hands. This was part of a short-lived and very controversial religion based on the belief in one god, the Aten. This was promoted by the pharaoh Akhenaten, the father of King Tut. The two manifestations of the sun god most familiar to us today are Khepri, the scarab beetle who creates the sun disk at dawn, much like real scarabs, or dung beetles, create balls of dung in which to lay their eggs, and Horus. Horus is the god with the falcon's head. As the sun god Horus, he is known as Ra-Horakti, he who is Horus of the horizon. Ra-Horakti sails his solar boat across the sky each day from dawn to dusk. When he sinks beneath the western horizon, he travels in his night boat through the dangerous waters of the underworld, the kingdom of Osiris. Osiris, the god of the dead, was a member of the Aeneid, the son of Newt and Geb. You can recognize Osiris because he is shown wrapped in white mummy bandages, wearing a tall ostrich feather crown, and carrying a pharaoh's crook and flail. And yes, he has green skin, which is a sign of regeneration. He is the husband of his sister Isis, and in most legends the father of Horus. There are many conflicting stories about his life and death, but the essence of these stories is that Osiris was killed by his jealous brother Seth, who is also known as Set, the god of chaos, storms, and all-around mayhem. Set cut his brother's corpse into pieces and threw them into the Nile. Isis searched for her husband's remains and was eventually able to piece them back together using mummy bandages. The other gods of the Aeneid were so impressed with Isis's devotion to her husband that they granted Osiris eternal life and made him god of the underworld. When a person dies, he or she travels to the underworld and the hall of Osiris. There, his or her soul is weighed by the jackal-headed god Anubis, protector of the dead. If the soul weighs no more than a feather, then the person is granted eternal life in the field of reeds, a wonderful place akin to our modern idea of heaven. But if a person's soul weighs more than a feather, a horrible creature known as Ammit, the soul eater, devours it, and eternal life is lost, literally for all eternity. As for the pharaohs, well, they were always gods, so when they die, they become one with Osiris and also one with Ra. Thus, the deified pharaoh continues to rule from heaven just as he had on earth, only now in an even more powerful and everlasting form. It's good to be the king. For the 10-Minute Professor, this is Susan Ray Euler. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you watch our next program.